Good day, everybody. This is John Scarborough. I wanted to switch gears a little bit today and talk about the construction side of my life. Most of you guys, most of my viewers know me as the guy that talks a lot about farming and stuff like that. But if anybody's been with me for very long, they also know that my primary reason for the channel is teaching people how to make a living at home, and then, or be able to stay, be able to be home as much as you would like to, at least, and not be gone all the time. I actually spent quite a few years of my life in construction traveling, and that's kind of what got me into that kind of thing. And I love farming, and that's one thing that I've started doing. So we have a lot of different videos about farming and things like that. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the construction side of my life, because I'm still into that and I still do a lot of it. Most of it is out of my shop. I'm in my shop today. But I do quite a bit. Like, I just finished a job near me. We were building adding on to a processing plant. We were doing all the pins and things like that. Pretty good sized job. We just got finished up with it and happy to have that. But what I wanted to talk about is welders specifically with their tape measures. Okay, as y'all can see, I have a lot of different brands and stuff here. I'm not going to advertise a brand specifically. I'll go ahead and tell you right now, this is my favorite tape measure. But that's just me personally. I know a lot of guys that use this tape measure, a lot of guys that use this tape measure and different things, and they do great. They're great. They're actually great tape measures. In fact, I can't honestly tell you that either one of those is better or worse. This is just what I started out using. I love it. And all the guys that all of the older guys that I learned welding and construction from, that I aspire to be like, use this. So I just kind of end up using that tape measure. And it might be partly because I'm a sucker for chrome, I guess, and maybe that kind of looks like that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but one thing I do like about this platform of tape measure is that it's actually it's +3. So when you stick that up to the back of something, so like if I take that, stick it up to the back of something, and then draw that tape measure out and measure, I can read right there my measurement and know that just add 3 and you've got your measurement. When you're working with square objects, that doesn't really come in handy as much, but when you work with pipe, which is something that I do a decent amount of now that I'm closer to home, because I'm working with smaller pipe, drill stem, things like that for people. And with doing that, I end up, the only way to really get an accurate measurement, because it's not a square surface, is to butt that all the way up against it. Now, I do have a laser tape measure, and that is very handy, but you can't always use it, and you sure can't carry it around with you all the time, or at least I don't. So what I wanted to talk about was a little bit today was what I have kind of adopted through tape measures, through my being of tape measures with construction, but mostly in welding. A lot of guys I've noticed, they'll wear this tape measure or a tape measure similar to it, a 25-foot tape measure. As you can see, that's what I have most of. Some guys will carry a 30-foot or something like that. Most guys seem to think that a 25 is not too big. I do see some guys carrying the Fat Max. Personally, I don't like carrying it. It drops them up. It just pulls my pants down too much. And I just don't like that. I did see one guy, he carried, as his daily carry, he carried a 16-foot Fat Max. And for him, that worked great. I still, if I would have found a 16, I would have grabbed it. This is actually a brand new tape measure, so I went ahead and picked it up because I needed a Fat Max. Every now and then I need one, and that, I just need that fatter tape that I can stick out there farther. I'm not going to use this tape measure. See, that's a fatter tape. But I'm not going to use this tape any more than I have to, because I just don't want to keep it on me. So if I'm doing a roof job, or if I'm doing some stuff where I need to be able to stick it way out there, then I'll grab this one and I'll keep it on me until I'm done with that. Okay. A lot of jobs, like with my, like with carpentry, if I'm doing some rough carpentry here and there, mostly I just do rough carpentry for myself. Like if I'm doing some framing or something, I'll do that for myself. And I have a decent set of bags, they're not sure exactly what you call them, but they're the Carpenter Bags that you wear where on Union you can keep all your tools in there. And that's really handy. You can keep a 25-foot tape measure, whatever you want, whatever you prefer. I still don't end up keeping that one in there unless I'm doing roofing. But you can keep whatever. Like I said, I tend to stick to that one. But if I'm not using that bag right there, then I'll just have it clipped to my belt for most other projects. But I find in welding specifically, as a welder, that this tape measure or a tape measure of this size starts to, it falls off on you, okay? It'll just fall over and fall off you and all like that. So it's kind of aggravating, you know, because this is what ends up happening to me as a welder. Okay, I'm going to see if I can get that tape out there. Now, I can't tell if you can see that in. There you go. That you ought to be able to see that. Look at that. And that's frustrating because once that happens, it becomes very difficult to reach that out and grab hold of anything. It catches wind. It becomes difficult, and it's not junk, but it's almost junk. And it's a shame because it's still a almost brand new tape measure, okay? And it just really boogers that end up. And I've had that happen to me quite a bit. And the reason is because as a welder, sometimes I got to get in a bad spot. I got to lay down on my side. A lot of times it's the side with my tape measure, and I roll over, I'll knock it off, and then I lose it and I don't even know, or I have to move it and lay it down, and then I forget I laid it down, or something like that. But then also because welders carry heavier objects than carpenters, usually we end up carrying heavier pipe or something like that. Just kind of ends up how it is. I mean, some guys wouldn't necessarily do it, but I usually do, and I probably shouldn't. But whatever the case may be, I end up carrying that closer to my side, and then I end up bumping my tape measure. Sometimes I knock it off. And there's just different things, different reasons why. And then this end just ends up getting boogered up. And it even started to happen to this tape measure right here, but it's not as bad. I mean, it's still pretty decent. So that's what kind of ends up happening. So I've ended up adopting, well, I'll just show you real quick. I didn't adopt this. This is a 10-foot tape measure. I actually found this. Let me see if I can get it out. I actually bought it as a joke. This little 10-footer right here. I bought it as a joke. I think it's a 1/4-inch spread right here, and it isn't even rolled. So, I mean, that's about as far as that's going to stick out before it starts to fall over. But I bought that as a joke for a friend of mine. And then afterwards, I never did get it to him because we just weren't around each other after that. I had left the job, and, the job was done. I bought it for him. I just kind of laid it around in my truck. So I ended up not ever giving it to him. Well, so long story short, I got to where this tape measure would either be lost, or I would lay it down, or I couldn't wear it because I was laying down welding or something like that. So I actually got to where I would stuff that in my pocket, of my welding shirt right there with my pen or my soapstone. And I would just stuff that in my pocket. And every now and then, if I was in a bind and I didn't have my big tape measure, I found that quite often, a lot of times it would just be, let me see if I can get this out here. A lot of times it would just be a little old measurement, I would just be working with a small piece of steel. And this got me out of that bind, having that in there. So what started out as a joke actually kind of got me out of trouble. Even though I couldn't really do just a whole lot with it, I didn't have to go running and searching for my tape measure. So long story short, what ended up happening was I would have that in my welding shirt, and then I would carry that as much as I could. But one day, I found this little tape measure, and I had seen the 12-footers before, and I didn't really like them. They had a little 1/2-inch thick tape, and you just couldn't stick them out very, very far and all like that. And I just thought, there's just no way that I would ever use that. It's still fat enough that it would just, it wouldn't get used. You may as well just continue to have that in your pocket. It's thin enough, and it'll get you out of a bind, but that's about it, So I just kind of kept those two going. Well, one day I found this in the store, and this is instead of a 12-foot, see if I can do this with one hand. Can't. Well, anyway, instead of a 12-foot, and you can tell it's burned from sticking it on a hot piece of metal, but instead of 12-foot by 1/2 inch, it was 12 foot by 3/4 inch. And that made a huge difference in how much farther I could stick it out, how much more I could do with it. So I was like, you know, I'm gonna just pick that up and just see. Well, guys, it kind of blew me away because I put that on my side and I just hung it on my side just like I did with this one. I didn't use it like I did this one. I had it in my pocket. I actually just took that and put it in my pocket. Put it on my side just like I do with this one. And I knew that I probably didn't need anything any bigger than 12 foot because, you know, as a welder, I'm not, you know, when I'm doing carpentry and stuff, I almost have to have something at least that big or bigger, you know. But as a welder, a lot of times I really am only working with like 4x8 sheet or pieces of pipe. And then maybe at the beginning of the job, I'm working with a bigger tape measure, you know. But I've gotten to where a lot of the stuff is smaller cuts that a 12 foot will use. So I decided to try it. Well, before I know it, I fell in love with it because it never fell off my side. It never caught on anything. I could roll over as much as I wanted while I was welding, you know. I could roll on my side, weld on my side. It never got in the way. I never knew it was there. So long story short, guys, I ended up adopting this little tape measure. I always got this tape measure close. It's always on my welding trailer, or if I got my truck rigged out, then it's on my welding truck, and it's always close. And a lot of times, it's right there near me, you know. But this little guy stays right there on me. I don't even need that anymore, you know. I'll just end up shipping that to my friend now. But anyway, I mean, that did get me out of a bind. I'm not going to knock it. But anyway, this little guy right here, the 12 foot by 3/4, ended up being so handy for me. And the biggest thing I like about this one versus a lot of them is it drops straight down to 2 inches. Okay, we go from 3 inches to 2 inches. Okay, and that's the only thing I don't like about a lot of other tape measures. Like this Stanley, for instance, right here. It's the same brand and everything, but for whatever reason, it's 2 1/8. I don't think you can read that, but it's 2 1/8 width on the back. Well, that means that now you've got to not only figure in inches, but also fractions. And not that you can't do that. It's just sometimes everybody knows that if you've been in construction, when you're working all day, sometimes you're a little bit tired and you don't want to have to figure any more than you have to. So just round numbers like 3 inches, like add 3 inches or add 2 inches is pretty easy. So that was one reason. Well, I mean, that was one of the things that really sold me on this little tape measure. And you can see that out of all of these tape measures, this is the most worn. And the reason is because this one now ends up being the biggest tape measure that I ever used. When you think about it, a lot of times you buy a tape measure, okay? Let's just say you buy this tape measure right here. Let me pull it out, okay? You buy that tape measure and you buy 25 foot and you use, for a lot of guys, you use anywhere from that much to 10 foot. And you use that part a lot, okay? So the rest of that tape measure just kind of hanging out in there, getting wasted, okay? So what I really thought was interesting on this job that I just finished, I showed up at the job, and I was using this one. I put it on my side, you know. Of course, like I said, this was in the trailer. If I ever needed it, it was right there. But I put this on, and instead of me being without a tape measure, because I ended up leaving this one behind or dropping it or it falling off or whatever, I always had the tape measure, okay? It was always right there with me, okay? Well, at the beginning of the job, as I said, there were some places where I needed a tape measure that was bigger than 12 foot. But the crazy thing is it was also bigger than 25, and I had to use this little guy, my little 50-footer, okay? That thing right there can fit in my back pocket. I put that in my back pocket when I'm doing bigger jobs. It's an old thing. I bought it for like $1, I think, at a pawn shop. But it's a steel tape, so it doesn't stretch. Unlike one of these, they will stretch if you go very far. I've actually had that happen to me, and it completely messed up. It was a pretty critical place, and it really messed up what we were doing. It was actually stretching. So the bad thing is I actually had to go to the other side and stretch it the exact same amount. I had to have the same amount of tension. So that is the bad thing about these plastic or whatever it is tapes, is that they will stretch. But these steel tapes, at least they don't stretch as much. And for me, I've never had any issues. But that's a little 50-footer, and it's very handy. It's hard to roll up, but it's very handy. So the point is that I wouldn't have even been able to use this. so all I needed was those 2 tape measures right there, and I just needed that one a handful of times right at the beginning of the job to get us set and rolling. After we got rolling, put that one back in my trailer, and I used that one throughout the entire job, had it with me the whole way, and never, ever needed another tape measure. Okay, so now what I think I'm going to adopt, and as much as I hate to not have this tape measure around because I just love it. This is what everybody has. Nostalgia, you know, there's nostalgia to it. I actually think that for the most part, I'm going to keep this right here in my trailer, my welding trailer, and I'm going to keep that, and then I'm going to keep that. And, you know, I may have that in my truck or something because I believe in having, if you're in construction, I believe in having spare tape measures. And that's actually what this is. I keep that in another truck of mine, one that just stays around the farm. It costs $3 for a pack of 2, I think. So I picked those up as spare tape measures. And the reason I went ahead and picked them up is because they still had a decent read, you know. It was still a good readable tape measure. And anybody that has been in construction very long or reading a tape measure for very long, if I can get my deal to focus, they don't like easy read. If you've been in construction for very long, I've never met a guy that's been in construction for very long that likes an easy read tape measure. And me personally, I can't stand it. There's just too much to read there. These little different length lines right here, that's all you need. Once you get into doing it very, very long, after a while, those other lines will start to become confusing. And I have seen more guys mess up measurements while using an easy read than I have ever seen anybody mess up a measurement using one of these. So that's just my little take on that. But anyway, so these little cheap tape measures, I do not believe in being without a tape measure. So I'll probably still keep one of those around as a spare. But it's always kind of nice to know now that, you know, I can keep that in there if I ever need it. And see, that's kind of the reason why I think a lot of people wear these, because they're just so darn light. These are just much lighter than these. But this little guy is nothing. You don't even know it's there. So for me, as a welder, that's what I've chosen to adopt, is to start using that little guy. But make sure you get the 3/4 and not the 1/2 inch. But anyway, I wouldn't use this in carpentry, rough carpentry. Honestly, I wouldn't use this in any other profession that I've ever dabbled in. I've been a welder. That's my primary profession. You know, I've done quite a bit of that. You know, and a lot of fabrication and things like that. Been in some some actual gas plants and things like that I've helped build. You know, passed multiple B31.3 severe tests, which, as far as I know, is the top grade test, as high of a test, as hard as a test as you can take and pass. And that's as far as I know. I may be wrong about that, but I know that it is definitely a pretty high code to be compliant to. But anyway, so for that profession, I have chosen to adopt that and then to keep those two close. So I don't know if that helps anybody. This video was geared more towards welders in my line of work. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. As for you welders that are watching this, just so you know, this channel is about mostly, we do a little bit with construction, and we do some stuff with in the shop and things like that. I have a fab shop here at home. So we do some of that, but mostly it's going to be geared towards the farm and things like that. But if you like these kind of videos and y'all appreciate that, then don't forget to like and subscribe.